to the stream. I'm Alfred.
Sumrain.
And this is episode 140. So in this episode, we're going to be interviewing Sophy Wong. Sophy is a designer, maker, writer whose projects range from like historical costumes to Arduino-driven wearable tech. She loves learning new skills and finding new tools to like just make things with. And she works with wearable technology, fashion design, costuming, and jewelry design. So with that, let's switch over to Sophy.
Yeah, sounds good. So let's see right here.
Good, almost.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
We got Sophy.
Hi, Sophy.
So it turns out that when we were introing, it was not on us
Oh,
because
really?
I forgot to change the
Oh,
camera.
what was it on?
It was just on the blank Matrix Lab screen, but they could hear us, so it's all good.
Okay, cool.
All right, so
Cool.
here's Sophy. Hi, Sophy. How you doing?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Your projects are like absolutely amazing. We'd love to see some and talk about your experiences and, just get like some advice and, about like what making has been all about for you.
Oh, thanks. Well, for me, I guess I didn't realize that I was a maker for a long time. I was just, tinkering on my own and making things. And I guess the term maker is really useful for me because it's hard for me to describe all the different things that I do. So just learning the word maker was like this aha moment that kind of like validated all these different things I was interested in. So and I'm really a designer originally, and in my core I'm a designer. So I really think about my projects in terms of like a design exercise and a design challenge, and that's kind of my framework for building all these things that I make. So yeah, I started I studied design in college, so my training is in graphic design, but I really think of design as more general and sort of like just a holistic framework that I can use to solve these problems or tackle these challenges that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the design framework is like probably one of the most like I guess empowering frameworks in a sense because I don't know, because when you have an idea, it sort of leads the way to how you can make it material, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, exactly. Cool. Yeah. When I think about design, I think about it from I let the idea kind of drive what I do, and that takes a lot of the pressure off of me because it becomes less about what I specifically want, and it lets me say like the idea is in charge and what's right for the idea, and that helps me like narrow down because usually I have a bazillion ideas and I have tons of ways I could go with my project, and sometimes I just need like to edit. I just need constraints to narrow it down so I can actually make some progress and make some decisions. And that's when design is really helpful because I can say like, okay, well, it's not about what I want to do. What makes sense for this idea? And, out of everything that I want to do, what makes the most sense and what would serve the idea best? So, yeah, it's definitely another tool in my arsenal that I just lean on when I'm really stuck, which happens a lot.
Yeah. So one of the things that like we were very curious about was, like you said, design is a tool you use, right? What kinds of, like, could you expand on like what your process generally is, and then what other tools you use, whether physical or a framework, to help you in your process so that other makers can draw inspiration from it?
Yeah, definitely. So when I have an idea, well, a lot of times the hardest part for me is starting because I often have this feeling that like I need to know exactly what I'm gonna build before I start making it, and that hangs me up a lot of the time because I'm like, well, maybe I need to be able to draw and like diagram specifically what I'm gonna make, and then I just make that thing.
Right.
Like in my experience, it just doesn't work for me that way. I just don't work that way. And it's not just a cut and dry, like roadmap to exactly what I'm going to build. So from experience now, I know that I just need to get started, and I start making things, and it's kind of like a back and forth process in the beginning. Like I'll tinker on something, and then I'll make some notes and do some sketching, and then I'll tinker on something else. It doesn't quite work, and then I go back to my sketchbook. So I do a lot of sketching in the beginning, but it's kind of this like physical sketching process, and I do a lot of word lists too. My sketchbook is a lot of as much words as it is pictures, you know.
Wow.
And then I just kind of work through like prototyping and trying things out. And oftentimes in the beginning of my process, it feels like I'm not getting anywhere. It feels like frustrating because I just want to get to the part where I know what I'm doing and I'm making something. But it feels like a lot of false starts, you know, like I tried this thing, I didn't really like it. I tried this other thing. It's interesting, but it's not quite right, you know. And it's kind of this cycle of like starting, changing my mind, and then going back, and then starting and changing my mind. And eventually, before, like I'm not conscious of it all the time, but eventually I dial in what I want to do and what the project is, and kind of just evolves organically. And I think it's really important to say that because there's this like idea that people who make things know exactly what they're doing from the beginning, and it's so powerful to know that that's not always the case, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I work through my idea. When I finally know what I'm doing, then I usually get super excited, and it gives me this surge of energy, and then I just like, you know, and then I just keep that cycle going. So then I you know, prototype the thing I want to make, and then from that point on, it kind of turns into what I call observe and adjust, which is really like what design is for me. I look at the thing and I'm like, this is working, but that's not working. That I need to change. So then I change that thing, and I have to just be okay with it not being right, and embrace that, to know what I need to do to make it better and fix it, which is a hard thing to do, especially when you've already, you know, invested in that process for a long time.
Right.
But, you know, I just keep saying it to myself, like observe and adjust, and eventually I get it to a place where I like it, and it's done. And if I don't like it, then I keep going, you know.
Yeah.
So like none of my projects are really ever completely finished, because there's always something I can make better, but eventually like I get to a place where I'm happy with it, and it's serving the idea, and then I know like I can move on for now.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, a lot of things in that I'm sure a lot of makers can resonate with.
Yeah.
Like there have been so many times, and it's like, oh, it feels like you're not getting anywhere, but that's important, like to go through that process. Yeah.
Or as right as you finish making something, you realize, oh wait, there's all these things I want to change. Dang it, now I have to redo it.
Yeah, and you can either go back and redo it and keep working on it, or you can take those things that you learned and that you want to do differently next time, and apply them to your next project.
True.
And start something new. And either one of those is totally valid, you know? Like if you want to keep toiling on the thing that you're still really interested in, and you know you can make it better, that's totally cool. Or if you're tired of working on that one thing, or you've had enough of it, and you want to, but you still want to take all those things you learned and use them, hey, you know, like that's a great opportunity to take that next idea that's been rolling around. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm working on, I've been doing a lot of 3D printing on fabric, and it's kind of a continuation of a project that I did in the past, which is actually Habit. It's this jacket that I think I was showing you when we first met.
Yeah.
So
it's so cool.
This is a purchase jacket that I started with, and I added these 3D printed diffusers to the back of it, and I put lights inside the jacket. So the lights are all behind the lining, so it's really cool inside. And then it's all NeoPixels in there, and I've got Circuit Playground Express from Adafruit driving the whole thing, which is just tucked into my pocket. here.
Nice, very
And
neat.
I can change the animations and the colors.
Oh,
I
wow.
press these
So
buttons,
beautiful.
you know. So, and I really like how this turned out. This is all 3D printed diffusers on mesh. And this was the first time I really tried that technique and tried to put it into a wearable garment. So it's really exciting and really promising, but I wanted to go a little further. So I learned a lot doing this project, and I got really excited about it. And I wanted to take it further, so now I've been working on 3D printing different kinds of shapes onto fabric.
Ooh.
So it's all
That's so
on
pretty.
this mesh fabric, and it becomes really,
Oh wow.
That's so cool. Oh my
really
god.
fluid. So I've been doing
Oh
all
my
these
God.
experiments. So this one has a lot of material, plastic material on it, so it's heavy, it's really drapey. And then this one is much lighter
Okay.
Nice.
thinner, and I'm playing with this like transparent aspect of the plastic when it gets that thin. And then I'm kind of looking at like how I can sew the pieces together. So this one's really cool because
Wow.
it really scrunches up in this
Whoa.
direction. And in this direction, you know, folds
Only
in
where the
this really
seams.
controlled way,
Right.
which is
Oh, that's
cool.
so cool.
So I'm doing all these experiments, and I'm kind of going towards putting it into a garment. So this is like my a screenshot from my Fusion 360.
Nice.
And this is just a sample, but this is where I want to go. So I'll actually show you the one that I pulled off of the 3D printer this morning. So I left it going all night because these prints kind of take a long time. And I was really excited about my design, but I printed it in like a translucent orange filament, which I thought was going to look really cool. But it actually looks exactly like a salmon fillet.
Oh yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, that's great.
It's so funny. I looked at it this morning when I walked in there. I was like, that looks like salmon. It looks like fish.
That's so funny.
So, you
Whoa.
know, that is not what I intended, but it's kind of funny.
And it moves
So-
like one too.
Yeah.
It does. I'm like, lunch.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are like the kinds of experiments that I'm working on right now, but they've kind of grown out of that project from before where it was a pretty simple pattern. It was just hexagons originally, and using that pattern on the mesh made a really flexible applique, but now I want to see if I can use the plastic to control the flex of the material even more deliberately. So I'm going a little further, and I've generated a lot of these samples and experiments, and I feel pretty good about it, but now I need to I'm trying to turn it into an actual piece. So now I'm in that phase where I'm like feeling like I've got those false starts, but I know just from experience, like I have to go through this period to get to the point where it feels like an actual thing.
Right.
Cool. I mean, the printing on the mesh is such a great idea. Like for
Yeah.
years, I've heard of people trying to make wearables with 3D printing, but it's
Yeah.
difficult, especially printing like NinjaFlex, the flexible filament. It's so difficult. But this seems, I mean, I'm sure you've had a lot of trial and error in trying to get it to work,
Yeah.
but it looks
Yeah.
way more approachable. It's so cool. So
Yeah.
you mentioned you use like Fusion and 3D printers, and what other tools do you use when making whatever different projects you do?
So I use lots of different kinds of tools. So I do, Fusion, like software-wise, I'm learning Fusion. I'm working in Fusion more very intentionally because I want to get better at it. I use Adobe Illustrator a lot, and I think that's just because my graphic design background, I feel very comfortable in Illustrator, so a lot of times it's easier for me to work in Illustrator in 2D than it is to jump directly into Fusion. So I do use Illustrator a lot. I actually, for my tutorials, I use I use Bridge, which is a photo organizing software from Adobe, and it's really useful for me to organize my photographs when I'm doing a tutorial or a post or something like that. I can take like hundreds of photos and dump them into Bridge and just move them around and organize my thoughts. And that it's actually really helpful in projects as well, because I'm always documenting what I'm doing, and it's just kind of a visual way to organize the process that I've already done. And then physical tool wise, I love my 3D printer. I've used it a lot. I love my Glowforge laser cutter, which is
That's awesome.
so awesome, especially if you're cutting from 3D printing, which, you know, it took like 5 hours to print this. You throw something in your laser cutter and it's done in like 2 minutes. It's like so satisfying.
Yeah.
And I'm learning how to use a PCB mill now, or a desktop mill from Bantam, which is amazing. It's just this like new kind of power to me that I can mill, you know, things on my desktop. But it's quite a learning curve, even for someone who has experience with software for modeling things and creating designs that can be cut on the mill. It's still a big jump to go from, you know, the 3D printing and laser cutting that I've been doing to go to milling, because it's just this whole other realm of knowledge, you know, that has been being developed for years in a separate world. And so I have to learn new terminology, to learn new materials, but I like that too. And then I use my sewing machine a lot. I have a sewing machine and a serger, and I've had them. They're both very old machines. Like my sewing machine I inherited from my mom when she got a new machine. So my sewing machine is from like 1998 or something like that. Like it is old, but it's fantastic, you know?
I don't know if sewing technology has changed much, so maybe it's like just as good as some of the newer ones.
Who knows?
Like,
yeah, I mean the newer machines. A lot of the newer machines have a lot of plastic on them, and they're a bit. They're just not as heavy duty, I think, as the older machines tend to be. So it's kind of nice if you can inherit an old machine that someone can teach you how to use, you know?
True. Wow. Yeah, that's super cool. Also, another thing, like it seems like you use a lot of like physics concepts in your like designs, you know, like the hexagon is like a light diffuser, like it does such a great job. And like, how did you pick up on those kinds of things? Did you just think, oh, I want this to happen, and then like research it, or, you know?
Yeah, I do a fair bit of research, but mostly I'm observing. So when I see and I'm always watching like what other people are doing. I think it's really important to be open to inspiration and influences from other people that are making things that inspire you. So I'm always looking at what other people are doing, and when I think that's a really good way to learn about new techniques and new materials. And when I see something that looks like it might, you know, be a good light diffuser, for example, I try it. So I do a lot of tests and samples and prototypes, and I just try things. I have a lot. I mean, I love putting lights in things. I think, you know, something about the sparkly bright lights are just like really fascinating to me. So I've kind of gotten more into that. And so I just have a bunch of lights on my desk, you know. I have like a string of NeoPixels that are just constantly hooked up to something, and I can just turn them on and I can just wave things over them and see what makes a good diffuser. And the 3D printing, it just goes hand in hand with it, because now you can make diffusers in whatever shape you want. So now I'm like training my eye when I see something that's like a milky kind of a plastic. You know, I'm like, oh, that might be a good diffuser, and I throw it over my NeoPixels, and if it is, I'm like, yes, what can I make with this now?
That's
you know?
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I like experimenting with different materials. So, I just kind of play with things. I think because I've done a lot of work with fabric and fashion apparel and costumes, I work in terms of swatches. So I pick something up and I play with it and I touch it and I scrunch it up and I, look at it through the light, and I just kind of have a habit of sort of inspecting materials, and um, I just kind of enjoy that aspect of it. So I think, and I think that's something I'm realizing lately, is that sometimes the inspiration or the motivation can just come from the material. You can be inspired by just a material and what you can do with it.
True. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It kind of reminds me of Kitty. She has this cool these rocks that come from like
I don't
lava.
remember.
She
Yeah,
calls
yeah,
them like
yeah.
Mars rocks or something. And
Yes,
yeah,
yes. I've
and
actually got some
Oh wow.
oh
from
really?
the same person. Yeah, and I'm going to be doing a project with the basalt. It's basalt
Oh,
fibers
okay.
Ah,
that
okay.
are turned into the. It's actually really interesting because it's a industrial material that's used
Really?
in industry here on Earth, but it's made out of basalt, and basalt is a rock that you commonly find
On the
on the
moon.
moon or
Yeah.
on Mars, regolith, basalt.
Hmm.
And so there's a planetary geologist from NASA who's exploring what we can do with basalt as a material. And his name is J.R. Skoke, and he's really cool. And we've been talking, and we're going to probably collaborate on a project to make something out of this basalt material. But it comes in all these crazy forms. Like you can get it
Mm-hmm.
in fabric form where it's thin and fluid, or you can get it in coils, and
Wow.
it can feel kind of wiry. It's almost like fiberglass. It's really interesting.
Oh, cool.
But
Very nice.
yeah, I think that kind of material exploration, like it's there's the scientific physics side of like what can this material do on a in a sort of a scientific technical
Right,
application,
right,
but then there's also like you need to just work with it,
right.
and I think like the more people are experimenting with these materials and just trying things, the better prepared we're going to be when we face the idea of actually, that's all you have to make something. So, so yeah, it's pretty
Super
cool to
cool.
be
Yeah.
working with that stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, I love Kitty's work. I
Oh
I,
yeah.
I love her line. She's got a really cool fashion line out now,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, she's super inspirational.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, that's really cool. That reminds me of like when I was younger, I didn't really hear too much about carbon fiber, and then it started
Mm-hmm.
getting popular. They make carbon fiber bikes,
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah, kind of like a life
yeah,
cycle like that.
Yeah.
That's
And
really
then
cool.
even now, new like SpaceX's new rocket that they're not making out of some composite; they're just making out of stainless steel, like normal
right,
cheap stainless steel.
right.
So
Sometimes you got to go with the old tried and true material.
yeah, yeah.
It's true.
So you've spoken a lot about materials and different tools you use, and when you go doing all these things and all these projects, what type of electronics do you use with it? Like you said, NeoPixels is a big one. The Adafruit
Mhm.
Circuit Playground, you said.
Yeah, yeah. So I use a lot of Adafruit products because they're super well documented, as you know,
Hmm.
and the community behind Adafruit is they're so helpful. So I know that if I'm trying a new product or doing something new, I have somewhere to go and people to ask for help. So I use a lot of Adafruit products, and and the NeoPixels. It's like when you start working with LEDs, if you can find a product or a type of LED that you understand well, you can use it in so many different ways. So the NeoPixels come in all these different form factors, and you only have to learn how to use it the first time, and you can basically expand that knowledge to all those different formats. So a
Hmm.
ring or strip or a
Hmm.
single individual LED. So that's really powerful, and I use those a lot. Um, I'm actually in the technology side of it. I'm always looking for a better battery. So I originally was using a lot of lipo batteries. You know, those little
Yeah, the small.
little
Yeah.
really thin, and they've got that foil covering,
Yeah.
and they're really great because they're so small and they're so light and they're so powerful, but they're so scary.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're wearing it on your body, they're really be taken care of. You don't want to puncture it. You don't want to twist it. And your body, you don't realize how much wear and tear your wearables go through in the course of a day. I mean, there's no part of your body that isn't flexing or bending or twisting throughout the course of your day. So lately I've been moving away from the LiPo batteries, and I've been going more for the USB power bank battery pack.
Just power charger.
Like, you know, that you can charge it. This is a big one, but you can get little, like, lipstick size ones.
Yeah.
And they have USB, and they often have on-off switches, which is amazing. You can come with an on-off switch. And they usually have all their information that you need to know about, you know, voltage and stuff like that, just printed right on it. So these are like my new favorite way of powering everything. They're also, I just feel like when I'm teaching someone how to do something, or if I'm explaining it in a tutorial, I just feel so much safer telling someone to use a battery that is robust and that is built to be portable and stuck in your pocket, and, you know, so that's my new technology crush right now.
Nice. Yeah, it's like it's always like a struggle, especially when you're making, I feel like, more like higher power requirement like projects, to get like something with a good voltage, good enough like milliamp hour, like, you know, life cycle, and like not like something like a lipo, which could which could be which could have repercussions. It's tough.
Yeah, and then the trade-off with that is weight, you know.
True.
But for me, I think about we carry heavy things all the time, and we just intuitively know how to carry those things on our bodies without it wearing us out. And so we put them closer to the center of our center axis. So if I'm like carrying some heavy battery like this, I'm not going to put it on the side of my outfit. It's going to totally pull me over. So I put it in the center, put it in the small of my back, somewhere in the middle, and then the weight is not that much of an issue usually. Or I build it into my costume. So for my spacesuit, I have, I don't know if you can see it, but I have this waist pack, and I have the helmet has lights in it, and I have a fan on the back that blows air through the helmet so that I can be cool and actually breathe and like wear it all day. And the batteries for it are those little those little USB ones that are like lipstick size. And so I just made a little pack for my waist where they slot in, and I can just plug directly into them, and they look like a prop. You know, I made them look like space
like
exploration
ammo or something.
And it's funny because I just walk around the con, and I have 3 of them. So I mean, I can power my suit all day and have 2 of those to spare. So I just walk around the convention, and like, you know, when my friends like, I need to charge my phone, I'm like, oh, here, and I just plug it in. You know?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Like, I think we should just always wear USB packs like on our belt.
Just have like a belt with like 3 slots, and you can just swap out. Yeah.
So useful, like so useful.
That's a good project.
Yeah. For all conferences.
Make it the belt buckle a huge like battery.
Yes, that would be so cool. Yeah,
that's a great tip. So you've used a lot of. So have you tried using like some of those more like daunting, like advanced type tech, like FPGAs or, you know, PCB design stuff? Like I feel like I saw something where you did some PCB design.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm starting to learn it. It is a lot to learn. So I got this. I'm so lucky and fortunate to be doing a remote residency with Bantam. So I got one of their mills, and of course it arrived, and I was like, I want to do all the things. I want to mill something out of brass. I want to mill something out of aluminum. I want to make a PCB. I wanted just to do everything. And all of those things have so much knowledge that you need to understand before you can jump into doing it completely from scratch. So I want to do the PCBs, and I'm starting with very simple projects because I tried to start with more complex projects, and just the amount of knowledge that I have to digest and understand to design a PCB from scratch, and not just a PCB from scratch, but a milled PCB, which is a specific type of design that you're going to have to do. It was just so overwhelming. So now I've taken a few steps back, and I'm working on just learning how the mill works and learning how to design for the mill. And I think once I get there, I'll be ready to jump back into the PCB design. So I'll tell you my little story about how I wandered through PCB design and like 2 different programs in like 2 days, and it was just so fast. So I got all excited and I decided I wanted to design a PCB. So of course I went to YouTube and I started watching all these YouTube videos about PCB design, and I found the amazing videos by Chris Gamble. He has a series on KiCad and teaching you how to do KiCad from as a beginner. It's so great. And I felt really great. Like I watched a bunch of his videos and I was following along, and I thought I understood it, and I started to try to design my own thing, and I did. Like I ended up making a couple of PCBs that I could mill, and when I just wanted to go a little bit further, it was like hitting a huge wall. And I find this happens to me a lot. I go through some beginner tutorials that are really well written and really great, and I get this like feeling of like, oh, I can really do this. And then I jump completely off the cliff to do my own idea from scratch, and it's like hitting the bottom, like, oh my God, actually I don't know what I'm doing, you know? So I need to just give myself the time to stay in that beginner zone for a little bit longer, and do some smaller deal projects that are giving me practice. So this is something that I've been learning with my Fusion 360, which is knowledge is half of it, and then practice is the other half of it. So for Fusion, I've done the same thing for years. I wanted to design one thing, so I would look up a tutorial on how to do that one thing, and then it would get me over that hurdle, and then I would finish my project. But I never went back and did practice. I only got the knowledge to complete my project. So I didn't have any retention. So then the next time I wanted to do that thing, I completely forgot how to do it. And I had to go watch the same tutorial. And I watched the same Fusion tutorial so many times, just spread out, you know, over like months or years. And I'm like, God, I'm not actually learning this program. I'm just getting the knowledge I need just to get over hurdles, and I'm not actually learning anything. So I took a whole month, a couple of months ago, I took a whole month, and I did Fusion every day for 31 days.
That's awesome.
And it was so helpful because I just practiced. You know, it wasn't about finishing one particular project, and it wasn't about making anything super amazing. It was about spending time in the program and just practicing. So that's what I need to do for this mill, which is this new amazing tool that I really want to be able to get a lot out of. And so I think I need to do something like that where I give myself dedicated time to practice. And I realize now it's separate from the PCB design. I'm going to have to give myself time to practice the PCB design and not just, swallow the knowledge, make a thing, and then, feel like I know exactly how to make PCBs.
Right.
So
I think what you just said is super powerful. Like, because I think for the most part, we all get so excited about the final outcome that we forget that the tools along the way are just as important to be fully versed in and like, understand and learn. And it's not just a means to an end. It's supposed to, stay with you forever, or as long as you can retain it, and you need to practice for that.
Yeah. And it's something that I'm not very patient about, so I have to actually tell myself to do it, because I'm always moving really quickly. I've got so many ideas. It's like my body just can't keep up with my brain. So I just I want to keep going as fast as I can. And sometimes I do need to just use it as a means to an end because, we can't all be experts at everything.
Right.
But if there's one thing that is a tool that you use often, giving yourself the time to practice it and really understand it is so valuable. It's like when I was first learning how to solder, like when I first was doing electronics, I was doing a lot of sewn circuits because that was my entry point into electronics. I didn't know that I could actually do electronics until I found sewn circuits, and they were not intimidating, and there were some really great tutorials. So I started making those things, and eventually my ideas got bigger than the conductive thread could accommodate.
Right.
And I realized I had to learn how to solder. And I don't know why it felt so intimidating, and I didn't want to do it. I put it off for a long time, and I tried to make this really elaborate project with conductive thread, and it wasn't working, and I was getting all these shorts, and it was so much work. And I realized at some point I am making this so much more work than it needs to be. If I just learn how to solder, which will take me, a fraction of the amount of time it will for me to undo this whole thing and fix it with thread, I'll not only finish my project, but I'll gain this skill that will open up doors for me. So I kind of think back to that when I'm reluctant to sit down and actually practice a tool. I'm yeah, but it's going to be so valuable to me because I know I'm going to use this a lot.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us.
So here, let me see if there's any questions on here.
Yeah, it's nice because through the conversation we've been weaving in and out of the initial questions we had. So, we've gone through everything, even though we haven't specifically asked everything, which is great.
Good.
So I guess one of the other things was how you started engaging with the maker community at large, right? When, like you said, there are communities you go to when you, want to troubleshoot and stuff like that. And then also, just people you discuss cool things with and, just those kinds of cool relationships and connections, whether in person or online, how would you, how was that for you? And how would you, suggest new makers, find those communities for themselves?
Well, it has been so amazing, and I think for me it was kind of difficult in the beginning because it's always hard to put your own work out there, or even just to say that you're interested in something that is maybe not super mainstream, especially if for me, I have a lot of people in my personal circle of friends who are not really into 3D printing or electronics. They don't really have that kind of they're not interested in that kind of work. So even my parents don't really understand my articles or what I'm doing, but they're super supportive. They just
That's awesome.
They just really know what it is, but it's fine, so it can be hard to put your work out there or to express an interest in something that if you don't know personally a lot of other people who are into it. And I think the internet is so amazing for uniting our communities. And so a lot of the friends that I have made in the maker world, I really made through Twitter and Instagram, and honestly, the Adafruit community has been so important. And they just have created a safe space for talking about this kind of work and expressing your interest and your curiosity and asking questions. So I think like finding those communities that are supportive and full of makers who have been there, who, gone through the same kinds of processes of learning things and trying things and failing. It's so important. And for me, it didn't start happening for me until I started putting my work out there, like on my personal Instagram or on Twitter, and it's rough. Like I understand why it's difficult to do that, and not everyone can. So if you don't feel like you can put your work out there, feel free to reach out to someone else who is putting their work out there. Because for me, when people reach out to me and they tell me like, oh, I'm actually trying something because I saw something you did, that is the most amazing feeling ever. And I will always respond, because I know what that's like, and I want to support that. So yeah, I think it's great. Like once the door is open, once you find that door and you open the door, it can be really, really great. So Maker Faire, I love your Maker Faire shirt. Like Maker Faire is such a great way to meet other people who are into things that you're into, or to be exposed to things that are sort of like crossovers with what you do. And so going to events like Maker Faire, or any local event that, like, I just went to a robot event here in Seattle. And it was amazing. They had like combat robots. My friend was fighting his combat robot in that, and he won. And then there were people who were working on robots that are like navigational rovers and stuff like that, and all these different people working with robots in different ways. And like just going to an event, even if you're not making in that space, if it's interesting to you in some way and it might inspire you, go there, talk to people, ask questions. Because the internet's a great way to find people, but sometimes then they're really far away and you don't get to be around them in your personal space. If you go to local events, you might find a community that's already there and people that you can learn from, So yeah, I think just putting your work out there, if that's too hard, then just get out there and ask other people about their work,
Right.
And if they've been through the same kind of experiences as you, they'll understand how important it is to support your interest and your curiosity.
That's awesome. Yeah. We actually have a question in the live chat from someone. They said, "Thank you, Sophie. Have you considered organic coverings for robots? Like taking inspiration from magnifications of insects. They're amazing."
Ooh, I love that idea. Yeah, there's some... that's such a great idea. I think of some of the designers that I'm really inspired by who've been working in the 3D printing world for wearables, are thinking along similar lines. And I think it's because there's the biology is a great analogy for how to make an inflexible material like plastic actually work on a body that moves. So it reminds me a lot of like a carapace of a bug,
Yeah.
articulated sort of plate armor on a beetle. And I think you'll start to see more of that kind of biological inspiration in in 3D printed wearables. It's just it's a natural place to go with it, and I didn't realize that I was going that direction too. But I mean, you can see it in
The salmon.
in these pieces. It just makes sense. Like if you want something to be rigid, it needs to be segmented, and that's the same way that that insect exoskeletons grow, you know? And if you think about it as an analogy to 3D printing, like the material is growing, I'm growing it layer by layer, and yeah, I think there are a lot of really cool analogies there and similarities in the process. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, they also just said colored foils as well. I guess, yeah, you can do stuff with foil. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great ideas.
yeah, I love that. And I love that mix of materials too. Like, I'm kind of experimenting a little bit with that myself. Like, I like 3D printing and I like the color filament. And I think in this project, I really want to work with, it's really an exploration of the material. So in this project, I'll probably leave the filament unfinished. But I love working with finishing techniques for 3D printing, and colored foil sounds really cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's really cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions wise, I feel like we're
We
done.
basically covered everything
Yeah.
perfectly.
That was great. Yeah.
Cool. I guess we'll give a second if anybody else in the chat wants to say anything. But Sophie, do you have anything else to say?
Just thank you so much for having me. It's been really cool to chat with you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah. We're seeing there's this one thing. Can we say that? Yeah. So we're gonna be giving this workshop at this AIoT like ARMS Dev Summit in December. I know it's in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, it's in Mountain View.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So if you'll be down there during then, we'll be there.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
mean, and even if you're not like at the event specifically, we'd love to like meet up and hang out. Like if you're around the area.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, in November next month, I'm going to go down to Super Conference, the Hackaday Super Conference,
Nice.
and I'm going to do a talk about making with machines. So I'll be talking about all of these projects that I've been working on with the 3D printer, the laser cutter, and now the mill, and just sharing some ways that I work with those machines more specifically, and then concept-wise, like some ways to think about designing for different maker machines.
Yeah.
I love the maker machines.
We actually saw, so you had shared that you were going to be talking, and so we were like, oh, we want to go, but then we saw that there's a wait list. We put ourselves on the wait list, but
For the
it
tickets.
was sold
no.
out. Yeah, it was so sad. We were like, oh no, but we put ourselves on the wait list just in case.
I hope you get to go. It's my first time. I've not been before, but I hear that it's amazing.
Cool.
So
Yeah, it
yeah,
sounds really
good.
cool.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be exciting, like the workshop you're giving, and it looks like there's some other really cool workshops going on there too.
There's
Great,
so many
yeah.
cool things and speakers, and I hope I get to see it all.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome,
Alright.
cool. So I guess that's it.
That's
the
it.
person who's asking the question said, "Very inspiring, Sophie. Thank you."
Oh, thanks. Great.
Cool.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah. So with that, we'll close it out. Thanks, Sophie, for having us, or for having us,
For joining
for
us.
joining us. Yes, it was great talking.
This is awesome talking to you. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Okay,
We'll see you
bye.
later. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So let's see. Let's end
Yeah.
this. It's always okay. There we go. And it should be us now. Cool.
Okay. Awesome. Oh my
Yeah,
God, her
that was
projects
really
are so
fun.
cool.
Yeah, and I loved like talking to her because she's so open. I felt about her, experiences.
Yeah, the whole
and-
process,
Yeah.
the design thinking around everything,
Yeah.
the love of materials. That's
Yeah,
really
that was
cool.
And I liked that she's like, I didn't really think about how a material could inspire a project before. Like, I haven't really thought about materials a lot, to be
Yeah,
honest.
no, it's more of like
Yeah.
the material is just, it's like I have a project, but it's more focused on the electronics or the
Yeah.
programming, and
Or
then
like what you wanted to do.
yeah, and then I will design in 3D print something, and it's whatever color controller I have laying around.
Right, yeah.
But just looking at the mesh fabric she's using, it gives
Yeah.
me ideas. That'd be like cool to make like costumes
Oh
with
yeah,
it,
like
and
Alex had done like like basically
oh yeah, she
printing on
had
mesh,
like I don't know, these like little pointy
and then on her
things. Yeah.
skirt, yeah, basically for wearables,
Yeah,
or like
yeah.
or just even clothing. Like
Yeah.
it's just cool,
Yeah.
like design and style.
Yeah, and I've tried
Yeah.
the like 3D print bracelets, but they're so brittle. Like having the mesh like allow
Makes
it to
it
be
easier.
flexible,
Yeah.
like it's
It's
nice.
cool.
Yeah.
It's a cool like aspect to dive into.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay,
Alright, well,
so any
about it.
announcements?
announcements wise, we still have the Voice AI hardware contest for Snips going on. It ends November 10th. So if you have a Matrix Matrix creator or voice lying around, or you wanna get one real quick and enter the contest, you still have time. And besides that, we have a Project 14 webinar coming up next
Ooh,
week,
yeah.
October 30th. We'll be sending out details on our social media about that shortly. And, feel free to join that. It's a webinar. We'll be going over Google Assistant with NFC, which is, a fun, cool, privacy-focused Google Assistant project.
Yes.
So, yeah, feel free to join that. And I think that's all for now.
Yeah, that's basically it. Okay, well, thanks guys for joining us, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.